This wasn't a dramatic mistake, and it didn't feel dangerous when it happened. It was the kind of decision people make every day without thinking twice. Small, practical, almost invisible. For years, his life worked exactly the way it was supposed to. He woke up early, followed routines, answered messages, met expectations, paid bills, and kept going. Nothing was falling apart. Nothing demanded immediate attention. From the outside, everything looked stable. He had a job, responsibilities, and a schedule that made sense. People described him as reliable, consistent, someone who had his life together. And in many ways, they were right. His life didn't look broken. It just felt unfinished. There was a quiet dissatisfaction he never talked about. Not because he didn't feel it, but because he couldn't explain it clearly. Everything was functioning, yet nothing felt meaningful enough to justify the effort. He wasn't unhappy in an obvious way. He was simply living a life that required constant maintenance without offering any real sense of progress. Whenever something felt uncomfortable, he postponed it. He told himself there was no rush, that timing mattered, that waiting was often the smartest choice. Difficult conversations were delayed. Decisions that required clarity were pushed aside. Anything that could disrupt the balance of his life was quietly avoided. At first, postponing felt harmless. Nothing bad happened immediately. Opportunities didn't disappear overnight. Relationships didn't collapse. Work continued. Bills were paid. Life moved forward. That's why it worked. Waiting gave him the illusion of control. Over time, this habit became automatic. He didn't consciously decide to delay anymore. It simply became his default response. When questions appeared in his mind about his career, his relationships, or the direction of his life, he answered them the same way every time. Later, not now, tomorrow. He didn't call this fear. He believed fear was obvious, loud, and emotional. What he felt was quiet, rational, reasonable. He preferred to think of himself as careful, patient, someone who didn't rush into decisions without certainty. What he didn't realize was that certainty was never coming. As years passed, the questions became harder to ignore. They didn't arrive as dramatic realizations. They appeared quietly, often late at night, when everything else slowed down. Is this it? Is this where my life stays? He rarely allowed himself to stay with those thoughts for long. Thinking too deeply made him uncomfortable, so he distracted himself with routine. The world around him didn't pressure him openly. No one demanded drastic change. No one told him he was failing. That made everything harder. Without external conflict, there was no clear reason to act. Stability became a trap disguised as safety. Opportunities still appeared from time to time, but they felt different now. Less urgent, less personal. They waited for him to choose, and when he didn't, they quietly moved on. Doors didn't slam shut. They simply stopped opening as wide. Without noticing, his life began to narrow. Not dramatically, but gradually. Each postponed decision made the next one heavier. Each avoided confrontation made clarity more distant. And still, everything looked fine from the outside. Eventually, a moment arrived where waiting was no longer possible. There was no countdown, no warning. He found himself sitting in a neutral room, under lights that felt too bright, surrounded by people who were simply waiting for an answer. It wasn't a dramatic confrontation. No one raised their voice. No one applied pressure openly. But the expectation was clear. Saying no would change things. It would create tension, demand explanations, and disappoint people who assumed continuity. Saying yes meant maintaining the balance, keeping everything exactly as it was. He felt the weight of that decision before he spoke. The hesitation lasted just long enough for him to realize what he was doing. And then he said yes, not because it felt right, not because he wanted to, but because saying no felt heavier. Because no required courage he no longer trusted himself to have. Nothing changed immediately. The conversation ended, someone smiled, and the moment passed. The day continued as if nothing important had happened. But that night, in the quiet space where distractions no longer worked, something became painfully clear. He realized he hadn't chosen a future. He had chosen to eliminate alternatives. By agreeing one final time, he had closed every door he kept telling himself he might open later. The life he imagined, the version of himself he postponed becoming, ended without ceremony. From that moment on, choosing differently was no longer an option. Not because someone stopped him, but because he had already decided. Failure didn't arrive loudly. It didn't announce itself. It came disguised as relief, as stability, as doing what made sense. Some lives don't collapse. They slowly settle into a shape that can no longer be changed. And some failures don't come from doing the wrong thing, but from agreeing one last time. That's how his old life ended.